Okay. Okay, but well, anyway, the indicative mood deals with facts and certainty. So we talked about a factual statement, all humans breathe. So now we need, I'm going to talk about, let's see. Oh, how about this? I think that the light is broken. Okay. So here we have, ooh, let me not use that. Here we have another indicative statement. We use is here because we believe that the light is broken. I think that the light is broken. So we call it the indicative mood here because we are certain that it's broken. Like, it doesn't necessarily have to be true. It could also just be something that we strongly believe to be true. So in this case, we believe that the light is broken versus the first statement where we know for a fact that all humans breathe. So the indicative mood can cover facts and things we believe to be true. So certainty. So, but the thing is that we as humans aren't robots. We can't talk about things that are true or all the time. We can't really do that. Like, sometimes we want to talk about things that aren't true or things that we want to be true. So in those situations, hypotheticals and desires, we have the subjunctive mood. So to give you an example, let me use a different color. Okay, so move that out of the way. Okay, so let's cover desires first. So we use the subjunctive mood when we want to talk about desires or orders or commands or requests, anything that we basically want to happen. For example, I demand that you be present for the meeting. Oops, no, that's right. Okay. Use a different color. Okay, so here we have be, which might confuse some people, but we use be here because be is the present subjunctive. And we're using the subjunctive here because we want someone to be present for the meeting. Someone isn't actually present for the meeting, but we want them to be. And that's why we use the subjunctive to express desires. And to give you another example, he asks that we stay quiet. Let me not use that. He asks that Susie stay quiet. Let's say that. Yeah, that's a good one. Okay. So here we have another. Oh, hold on. Well, I'm about to get to that. But anyway, he asks that Susie stay quiet. So why is it stay and not stays? Because normally you would put the S there for the third person singular, right? Susie would be the third person and she's just one person. So we would need stays. But this is the subjunctive. And in the subjunctive, we just use the base form of the verb. And we use the subjunctive here because, again, somebody wants Susie to stay quiet. She isn't actually staying quiet, but we want her to stay quiet. So we use the subjunctive. And I know some people are going to be wondering, why is it be and not are? Or why is it stay and not stays? Well, the indicative and the subjunctive are conjugated differently. So let me go ahead and type the conjugations out. Let's start with the verb be, right? So, I am, let me use blue. Okay. So for the indicative mood, we have I am, you are, he is, he, she, let me do he, she, it is, we are, you all are, and they are, right? We have this for the indicative mood. Let me move this. Actually, no, that can stay there. I'll just do this. Take this. Okay. Indicative mood. And then we have the subjunctive mood, which is conjugated differently. Let me just do this. Okay, so I be, you be, he, she, oops, it be, we be, you be, you all be, I don't want to confuse people, and they be. So, delete that. Okay, so let me put these closer together. Okay. So notice how the indicative mood has the regular conjugations. I am, you are, he, she, it is, we are, you are, and they are. Compared to this one where we have be all over the place. And we have this conjugation because the subjunctive mood, and this is the case for all verbs in the subjunctive mood, the subjunctive mood lets you use the base form of the verb. And the base form of the verb, if you guys don't know what that is basically the part of the verb that comes after the word to. Like for an infinitive, you know what an infinitive is? It's like a verb phrase with to in it. So it's like to and then whatever, like to eat, to swim, and etc. Like that. Those are infinitives. To eat, to swim, to drink, whatever. And the base form of the verb is just the part without to. So the base forms of these verbs would be, and let me use a different color. Let me move this. And let me take that out of the way. Okay. And this would be the bare forms of these. Hold on, sorry. Take that out. Let me include another example just for kicks. To sleep. Let's say that, right? We have infinitives here, to eat, to swim, to sleep. So the subjunctive, I'm sorry, no, not the subjunctive. We're talking about the bare form. The bare form of these verbs would be eat. Bare form would be eat, swim, and sleep. So the bare form is just the infinitive, but without the to. So, and we use, and this is, and someone else already said it in the chat, I believe, that it's a bare infinitive. That's what these are called. The subjunctive takes the same form as this bare infinitive. So for every verb, like to be, to walk, to run, to call, all of that stuff, we just use be, run, call, etc. And in this case, the infinitive, the bare infinitive of to be would just be, right? It's just be. The bare infinitive of to be is be. And the subjunctive mood takes the same form as the bare infinitive. So that's why it's be. Oh, move out of the, okay. So that's why that's why these conjugations exist. And you'll notice that every person has the same conjugation. So there's not a single subjunctive verb in English where there are different conjugations. No, it's all the same verb, all the same conjugation. So I be, you be, he, she, it be, we be, you all be, they be. And let's say we have another verb. So,
for example, if we say he asks us, yeah, be quiet. It's correct to say that, yeah. He asks us, be quiet.
he asks that we be quiet would be the right way to say it. Or you could say he asks us to be quiet.
But
not he asks us be quiet. No, you can't use the bare
no.
infinitive like that. So here, let me show you. That's actually a good question here. So let me show you what's acceptable, what's not. So you could say, he asks that we be quiet, or
Yeah.
he asks us to be quiet, but not he asks us be quiet. That's this last one is not correct. So you can't say this. But you can say the first two. So that's it for that. You can't use the bare infinitive like that. And I mean, there are some cases where you could use it in a certain way, but not like this. So just erase that, and erase this, and this, and this, and this. Oh, no. And this. Okay. Okay, so now we're going to conjugate another verb. Let's say, okay, let me use this color. So just to show you guys, because this is a very important point. So let's say run, right? I run, you run, he, she, it runs, we run, you all run, and they run. So that's that one. And for the subjunctive mood, it would be I run, you run, he, she, it run, we run, you all run, and they run. Okay, so notice again how, see, for the subjunctive mood in English, a lot of the time it looks just like the indicative mood, except in one case here, run. He, she, it, run. So for the third person singular here, he, she, it, we don't use runs, we use run, compared to the indicative mood, runs. So that's something to keep in mind. That's the only place for regular verbs where the subjunctive differs from the indicative, just that one area. The rest, it's just the same. So I run and I run are both indicative and subjunctive. But he, she, it runs is not the same as he, she, it run. So don't confuse these two. Okay. Okay. So what was I? Okay. Yeah. So, but for B is a special verb here because it's different in all situations. This is the only verb where all the conjugations are different. But for every other verb, all the other verbs, it doesn't matter what verb it is, only the, let me show you, only the third person singular, only the third person singular changes. But for B, the whole thing is different. So to be would be in the subjunctive, to run would be run in the subjunctive. So that's something to keep in mind. and it differs from Spanish. Like, so let's say that. Let me use a different color here. Okay, so let's conjugate the verb span. Like, hold on, go. Okay, so let's say, like in Spanish, you have soy, eres, es, somos, sois, son, and that's for the indicative. For the subjunctive, it would be sea, seas, sea, seamos, seáis, seáis. I think that's how you would do it. I can't remember the accent rules, but sean. Okay, so notice how in Spanish the indicative is completely different from the subjunctive, just completely different. They're not the same. But in English, it's not like that. We don't really do it like that. It's not like that. Much of the time, the subjunctive looks very much like the indicative. So you're wondering, okay, they look very similar. How do you tell the difference? Well, you tell from context. Context normally makes it pretty obvious. So let me show you an example that could be interpreted either way. Let me do this sentence in the indicative. Hold on, let me just make sure I actually did conjugate that verb correctly, because it's I hope I did. I hope I got it right. No, that's not. Yeah, okay, yeah, so it does have an accent. Okay, just making sure. I don't want to feed people wrong information. Okay, so okay, so let's do an ambiguous example. So let's say we have, it's important, oops, it's important that you see a therapist. How about that? And then, no, not this color. Okay. It's important that you see a therapist. Okay, so you notice that we have this blue sentence. I use that to represent the indicative, and I'm using the red color to represent the subjunctive. So the first sentence is the indicative mood, the second sentence is the subjunctive mood. But you notice that the C and C for both sentences is the same. And you're like, okay, wait, how do I tell the difference? Like, because it could be either one. Well, again, you tell from the context, because the first means someone sees a therapist and that's an important fact, and this, while the second one means that someone doesn't see a therapist, but you want them to see a therapist. So you tell from the context, really. Context normally makes it pretty obvious, but there are cases where the two verbs do actually differ. Let me type up an example. So how about, I insist that my brother is here, versus I insist that my brother be here. Again, in the third person singular, he, she, it, or any singular noun like my brother, since it's just one person, that's when the subjunctive is made pretty obvious. So here we have two different verbs. The first is the indicative is, the second is the subjunctive be. So again, it's the same as in the previous example. In the first one, you're saying that you know for a fact that your brother is here. You strongly believe it to be true. Whereas the second one is like, my brother isn't here, but I want him to be here. So in the first one, your brother, you know for a fact that your brother is here. For the second one, you want your brother to be here. So So that's when the subjunctive really
Wait, wait, wait,
is
wait.
really
And the
obvious.
first time, what did you say?
Huh?
In the first, the indicative mode, what did you say about the indicative mode? Like, I insist that my brother is here, it means that is.
Oh, well, the first one is basically you believe it to be true. It's basically a fact to you. I insist that my brother is here. I know that my brother is here. That's basically what it's saying. So, but the second one says you want your brother to be here. Your you demand that your brother be here. Like you want him to be there. So the first one is a fact. The second one is just a desire. So that's the difference.
Oh, I insist that my brother be here. Like, it's like a something like imperative, but you know, but it's like a desire, like a imaginative desire.
Yeah, like your brother isn't actually there in the second sentence, but you want him to be there. But in
Mhm.
the first sentence, you're saying that he's actually there. You know that he's there. So that's the
Okay, so for
difference.
example, if I say, I insist that you be here, it's correct?
Yeah, because you want someone to be there. Yeah, that's correct.
But if I tell to someone, I insist that you be here, like in imperative form, it's correct or not?
Oh no, that's not the imperative. That's something else. For the imperative, you would just simply say be here.
Oh, be here.
Yeah, that's the
Okay.
imperative. Okay. But yeah, that's the main difference between the two. So let me explain this in more depth. So, but yeah, just keep that in mind. Okay, so what's I going to? So we often use the subjunctive, and let me just do a bunch of examples. We often use the subjunctive to express things that we want to happen. So I ask that everyone complete their homework. Let me just use his or her I don't want to confuse people. Okay. I ask that everyone complete his or her homework. So I want everyone to complete his or her homework. And as you can see, we don't say everyone completes, but everyone completes. We use the base form of the verb, which in this case is complete. And another example would be, he orders that the meeting be moved to next Monday. So here we have be for the subjunctive. He orders that the meeting be moved to next Monday. He wants the meeting to be moved to next Monday. So we use a subjunctive to express a desire here. And for another example, I'm trying to think of another. Oh, yes. No, let me think of another one. She proposes that the family waits until tomorrow to go to the beach. Yeah, let's do that. Okay. And here we have another subjunctive. Instead of the family waits, or I guess actually the family could be either plural or singular, but since they're acting as a single unit, it would be singular. So we use wait instead of waits. So she proposes that the family wait until tomorrow to go to the beach. So here you notice that we have verbs like ask, orders, and proposes, things that tell us that we want something to happen. We have a desire. And these tend to go along with the subjunctive. But you want to be careful though, because verbs like insist and suggest can be either subjunctive or indicative. And also things like it's important that can also be subjunctive or indicative. So to give you an example with suggest, I suggest that he, I'm trying to think of one. Okay. I suggest that he reads comic books versus I suggest that he read comic books. So it's similar to the example I had with insist. The first one implies that, his reading comic books is a fact. I suggest that he reads comic books, meaning that I think that he actually reads comic books. But the second one is different. It says, I suggest that he read comic books, meaning that someone wants him to read comic books.
He should do that. Like, he has
Yeah.
to do that. Yeah?
Yes. Yeah, that's basically it, yeah. The first one's a fact, the second one is a desire or a recommendation or anything like that. So you could say, I urge that you read comic books, or I recommend that you read comic books, or I insist that you read comic books, or anything like that. So that's the main difference between these two. So suggest can be either indicative or subjunctive. Well, not the verb itself, but what comes after it, the verb that comes after it. So that's that example. And I've already shown you the examples with insist, the verb insist, and the clause, it's important that. It's important, I mean. So those can also be either indicative or subjunctive. But that's just something to keep in mind. So does anyone have any questions so far? I don't want to go too fast. Let's see.
Yeah, I have a question. Like,
Uh-huh.
subjunctive asks for a for the conjunction that, for that. I saw that. I've seen that recently. I've seen that it asks for the for that.
You're asking about the conjunction that?
Yeah, like subjunctive asks for that. Like without that, it's not subjunctive.
Oh, you're asking if it can be like removed from the sentence?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, yeah. Yeah, many times you can. Not always, but many times you can. Like you could say, instead of saying, I demand she be placed on probation. You could say, I demand to be placed on probation, and not, I demand that she be placed on probation. The that here is optional, because you can take it out and you could still understand the sentence. So, and you could also do that with other examples too, like, oh, I don't want to use that color, because that, I want to use, okay. So you could say, so that's one example. So without the that, I just put the that in brackets to show that it can be taken out. So, and another example would be, we suggest you stop talking. So instead of, so instead of saying we suggest that you stop talking, you could say we suggest you stop talking. The that is optional. And that's another example. But of course, trying to think of one where, I guess, yeah, in most cases you could take it out, but I'm trying to think of an example where that wouldn't actually work. I guess I can't really think of one, because there are times where you can take it out, and taking out the word that would actually make the sentence sound better or more natural. But there are times where taking it out would sound really awkward. Let's see. Someone asked a question in the chat. Is there any possibility to use the subjunctive mood in a written report or text? Yeah, in fact, it's highly encouraged that you do so, because formal writing often uses the subjunctive. And this is the case for pretty much any dialect of English out there. So I guess in this case, like, I have an example. They ask we be quiet. I mean, it's possible to say that, but taking out the that here would sound kind of weird compared to demand and suggest, where you could take out the that and that would be fine. So in cases like this, putting in that would make the sentence sound better, because taking it out would just make the sentence sound weird. But it's something you're just going to have to get a feel for, because many times you can just take out the conjunction, but there are times where you shouldn't take it out because it'll sound a little weird to
But in
copy.
subjunctive, do we use us, like, himself, like, reflexive pronoun, us, himself, like, herself, you know.
You're asking if reflexive pronouns are used?
Yeah, they ask us, like, or they are.
Can't think of an example where you'd actually do that. Unless you wanted to say it like this. Here, let me show you. You could say it like, yeah, let me move this out of the way. Someone else also asked a question. I'll get to that in a moment. So you could say something like, our father urges that we shower ourselves before swimming. So in that case, you could use a reflexive like that, but in the clause after that. So that's what you're trying to ask. So you could use a reflexive like that, but I don't think you could ever have a case where you use the reflexive in this part of the sentence. I can't really think of an example where you could do that. But in this case here, yeah, you could use the reflexive, and that'd be fine. We shower ourselves. Okay. If that answers your question. Okay. Is there any difference between they ask that we be quiet and they ask us to be quiet? No, there's really no difference in meaning. Um, there's really no difference. The only difference is that the first one sounds a bit more formal than the second one. They ask that we be quiet sounds a bit more formal than they ask us to be quiet. The second one sounds a bit less formal, because using the subjunctive like that kind of sounds a little bit formal, just a little bit more, but people still say it, of course, in normal speech, but using it like that, like they ask that we be quiet, is a little bit formal, more formal than they ask us to be quiet, but really there's no meaning. There's no difference in meaning between the two. You could say either one. Okay, so we talked about the subjunctive mood regarding desires. And actually, there's one question someone asked here that I should cover. So regarding desires, there's actually another alternative construction to the subjunctive, and some of you are probably already aware of this, but in American English, we tend to use the bare infinitive for the subjunctive. So we say, they insist that the committee discuss this issue. How about that? Okay. In American English, you would hear this, but in British English, you would actually hear, now granted, I can't say this is the case for all Brits, but a lot of them do say this. They insist that the committee should discuss this.
Yeah.
Discuss this issue. Okay, so technically, now in American English, we would say the first one. So the first one is AME, but the second one is British English. And so the first one is American English. Let me move this out of the way. And the second one is British English. Okay, so in American English, we just use the base form. To discuss, discuss. That's the base form, discuss. But for British English, they put a should in front of the verb and then the verb itself. Like, so they say should discuss. This isn't actually wrong. This is not the traditional form of the subjunctive. This is just an alternative form. And the second one's much more common in British English, but you can technically use either one. But just know that in American English, you're not really going to hear should being used like that. We don't really use it like that. You can, but we don't. But in British English, you would hear that, the should and the discuss. But technically both are fine. Honestly, the should in most cases seems pretty unnecessary because the context pretty much tells you whether or not the statement is a request or a desire or anything like that. But if you want to put it in there, you can. And there are actually times where it might be more obvious. The subjunctive might be more obvious in with the use of should. So let me show you an example. So it's important that no, let me not do that one. Or actually, no, that can work. It's important that you take your time on exams versus it's important that you should take your time on exams. Okay, now in this case, well, actually in a lot of cases really, but in this particular case, take could be either subjunctive or indicative. I mean, in this case, I want it to be subjunctive, but it could technically be either one. But the should here does make the subjunctive more obvious, so it's not useless. It does have its uses, but in American English, we really just use the bare form. We don't find the should necessary. It's not necessary, but it's not exactly useless, if that makes sense. So that's just the difference between the two. But really, either one is grammatically correct. One is not more correct than the other. No, I can't really do a British accent very well, so I can't really say committee in the British accent. I know that British English tends to, with their T's, they tend to actually pronounce them, like tap them instead of flap them. So instead of committee, it would be like committee. But in American English, we wouldn't pronounce a T like that. It would just be like a flap. So it would be committee. But that's really all I know about that accent. Oh, did I answer your question? Oh, wow. Okay, cool. Anyway, but yeah, that's one defining feature of the British accent. They pronounce their T's. So instead of butter, like, butter that you put on bread, they say butter. And instead of, I'm trying to think of another one. Instead of water, they say water and other things like that. But anyway, where was I? All right, the use of should. Okay, so let me talk about this. Is actually an important point right here. So you can also use should. There's also a use of should that both American English and British English use. So we can use should to talk about, like, here, let me type up an example. Okay, so if he should come to the house, give him this bag. So let me use this. So if he should come to the house, give him this bag. So here we have if he should come here. We're using should like as an alternative form of the present subjunctive here to point to a possible future event. So this is when we use like another form of the present subjunctive to point to the future. Like if he should come to the house, give him this bag. But you could also say if he comes to the house. You could just use if he comes to the house, give him this bag. Now, there's actually an interesting history behind this because traditionally, people in the past, people would say, if he come to the house, give him this bag. That's actually that's the original subjunctive form used here, but no one really talks like that anymore outside of fixed expressions such as if need be. In this case, be is a subjunctive, and we use it after need. So that's like one of the only few instances of the present subjunctive being used after if. Normally, we don't use it like that after if anymore. So no one really says this anymore. So if he come to the house, no one really says that anymore. That would be correct back then, but nowadays it's not. So we just use the indicative. If he comes to the house, give him this bag. But if you don't want to use that, you could also use should to give the sentence a subjunctive meaning. If he should come to the house, give him this bag. And you can even change it around by saying, should he come to the house, give him this bag. I keep misspelling things. Okay. And now you have an inversion with should. So instead of if he should come, you have should he come. So the if is implied. It's gone because we can just invert it. So now we have should he come to the house, give him this bag, which is the same meaning as the first one, but with a slightly different word order. So to summarize this section here, this one is a modern alternative form of the present subjunctive. Put that down there. This one is a modern, this is modern and it uses the indicative instead of the present indicative, sorry, instead of the present subjunctive or the alternative form. This one is archaic. So I'm not going to say that it's completely wrong. It's just that nowadays it's wrong, but the standard back then would have allowed this. So this is, if he come to the house, this is archaic, and it uses the pure present subjunctive. And this is just an inverted version of the first sentence. And it's not just this usage that's considered outdated. There are other forms like a popular one here is, here, let me point it out. And that's probably the last usage I'm going to cover. I don't want to get into too much about the history, but something that you guys should know. So I forgot what Bible verse this is, but it says, though he slay me, I shall trust in him. Him referring to God. So here we have slay instead of slays. This is a subjunctive here, a historic form of the subjunctive, the present subjunctive that's being used in the Bible after though. Normally we don't use though, the subjunctive after though anymore though. So this is also outdated. So we would not say, though he slay me, I shall trust in him. But we wouldn't say, though he slays me, I shall trust in him, because that would mean something completely different, and that would just not work at all. Because it would mean that someone's actually slaying you, and you're trusting in them anyway. But that's not what you want to say, because the original here says, though he may slay me, I shall trust in him. So the key word here is may. And that's how people would say it nowadays. They would just say, though he may slay me, I shall trust in him. So that's how people would actually say it. They would use may. They wouldn't use the indicative like that. They would just use may. So though he may slay me, I shall trust in him. So that's just something you should keep in mind. Sometimes we use may instead of the pure subjunctive. You know, like with should, but in a slightly different way. So sometimes we just use should instead of the bare form, and sometimes we use may instead of the bare form. But that should cover everything about the present subjunctive. Just take all this out. When do I use it's and when do I use it? Well, it's is just it is, so that's really all there is to it. Unless you're talking about it's with an apostrophe and it's without an apostrophe, but that's a different topic. Okay, so let me talk about, well, first, there was a quiz I had ready. I want us to, now that you guys, here, let me just, okay. Now that we have a basic idea of the subjunctive, no, actually here, wait, before we do that, let me just recap what I said about choosing the right form. So remember, the subjunctive chooses the bare form of the verb, right? The bare form, so, of the infinitive. So we have, so just to make sure you guys understand exactly what form you should choose, let's put 5 verbs: to train, to dance, to watch, to listen, to work. So, and let's do this. So, can anyone tell me what the correct form of the subjunctive for to train be?
I train.
Oh, you can just say the verb. I didn't put a subject, so just say the verb.
Train.
Yeah, perfect. Okay.
Train.
Mm-hmm.
Train.
So the first one is train. So to dance, what would be, yeah. And then to watch would be
Watch. Watch. Yes.
Yes, good. To listen would be,
Listen.
and to work would be,
Walk.
yeah, see? The subjunctive is not that hard. In English, you don't have to worry about conjugating. It's the same form as the bare form. So that's easy enough. It's not like in Spanish or French or whatever. Okay, so now that we know that, let's go ahead and have an exercise where, and there should be enough of us to do this. Let's have an exercise where we put in the right subjunctive form. Except for number 13. I don't want you guys to do that one, so ignore that one. Let me see if I can just cut it out. Okay, I can't really type it in. But that's okay.
Could you stop,
So,
please?
huh? What did you say?
No, it was a noise. It is a noise.
Oh, okay, I think it's, okay, it seems to have stopped. Okay,
What's the questions?
so the questions are, hold on, I'm trying to pull this, trying to make, okay, perfect. Let's just do it like that. Okay, so for this exercise, we fill in the blanks with the simple present subjunctive of the verb shown in brackets. So for example, they insisted that she blank at once. So here's the verb, and you have to choose the right form. So what would the form be? Come. They insisted that she come at once. And for this one, the proposal that she blank us has merit. So to meet, we need the subjunctive form, which is just meet. So the proposal that she meets us has merit. Okay, so Vlad, you can do the first one.
He suggests that I be ready by 8 o'clock.
Perfect. I can't type it in, but that's okay. So,
No.
I just, okay. Okay, next would be, I don't know how to pronounce that name because it's in the different letters, but let's see. Okay, well, anyway, yeah, whatever. Just type it in the chat or like say it. I don't really care which way you do it. But yeah, as someone else said, we request that she open the window is correct. So what would the third one be?
Why without S?
Because
Is she
remember,
not need the S?
no, remember we're doing the subjunctive. So we request that she open the window. So
Okay.
yeah, remember we used the bare form for the subjunctive.
Okay.
They demanded that he leave the room. Yes, that's correct. Let's see, how, anyone else want to answer? Maxip, PP, Luigi? You can type in the chat or just unmute your mic, either way. But if not, you don't have to answer, but anyone can answer really. But what were we on? Oh yeah, number 4. I will ask that she accompany me. Yes, that's correct. So it's really simple. It's really just a form without to. That's it. Okay, number 5.
By turn. You can put them by turn, like a This for you, this for you, this for you. No?
No, I can. I can. I'm just that some people are not really like engaging. I told them they could, but but okay. Let's go. Someone else just answered it. So yeah, it is fly. But okay. How about this? Why don't we have Maxip answer either in the? Oh, he already did. The request that we be ready to leave at 6 is a nuisance. Yeah, that's correct. Okay. And someone else. Yeah, 5 was fly. Okay. Will, then you can answer the next one. You can just type it in. It doesn't matter if your mic doesn't work. You could just type it in. So we're on number 7. Take. Perfect. Got it. Okay. Let's go ahead and have PP answer the next one. Or Pepe. I'm sorry. I butchered your name. But Pepe, yeah, you can answer the next one. You can just type it in if you want. B. It is necessary that you be able to come with us. Perfect. Okay. Let's have, let me just make sure. Okay, let's have David answer the next one. They asked that we blank standing.
They asked that we remain standing.
Okay, good. Okay, okay, now for number 10, the requirement that he blank work will be hard to meet. Let's have, okay, Vlad, let's just have you do this one. You can do number 10.
Fine.
Yeah, the requirement that he find work will be hard to meet. How, we haven't heard from.
Oh, so we can express these things with the requirement, the demand.
Yeah, basically anything that you want to happen or that you feel should happen or that something that's important, like anything like that, really. So, like, yeah, you could have, there are many things that you could use with the subjunctive, really. So, like you could say, the requirement that he appear in court is not debatable, or we had an agreement that you not waste time.
Oh, that's
on
why in movies, you hear that idea, her idea that she was talking about. No, the idea that she take was not good. Like what she
Yeah,
took.
the idea, that's also a good one.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point, really. Yeah, when you learn the subjunctive, you start seeing that you can actually apply it to a lot of situations. Number 11 would just be, for max, number 11 would just be learn.
Like
but
the
you're asking
idea
if,
that we should, that's why, about after after we should take, you know, they don't put the idea that we should take, they don't put a s, you know, they don't put s, they say the idea that we should take, you see,
The idea that we should take.
they don't put s, they put without s, you see,
Are you talking
the
about?
idea that we should take. Yeah.
Are you talking about like the use of should
We
there,
should
or?
take like the idea. Yeah, yeah.
Oh, okay. I mean, yeah, you could. I guess in the case you could technically use should in many of those cases too, if that's what you're referring
The
to.
idea that we should take it.
Sorry, I don't know why my thing just disconnected. Okay, but to go back to what we were talking about, someone just asked if, I think you were asking Maxip in number 11 that you could use either the indicative or the subjunctive. I mean, you could, but that would mean something else. Like, it's important that he learns everything he can, means that he actually does learn everything he can, and that's an important fact. But without that S ending, it means that you just want him to learn everything that he can. Okay.
But you know, it's kind of easier to say to instead of subjunctive to use should. But yeah.
You could,
like,
but the problem with that is
easier.
you could, but the problem with that is that like okay. And the problem with that is that like in American English, we really don't use should very much compared to British English. So if you're trying to learn American English, you have to learn how like not to use should like that. But in British English, you can do it as much as you want. So that's the issue.
I have a question. It's important that she should be here, or it's important that she should to be here?
No, just should be. Like it, you never put to after should.
After a modal verb.
Yeah, like you can't put to after modals like that. So you can't say he should to be here or whatever. Okay, someone else said something. Actually, I only add the S when the sentence is a directive or an order of some fact. You add the S when it's a fact. You take it out when it's a directive or an order. So that's something to keep in mind. And the last one would be the demand that she blank the report has been carried out. So in that case, yeah, complete. Yeah, there you go. So it's just really easy. Subjunctive is just very easy. One thing I forgot to mention, and this is an important point. When you want to negate a subjunctive, a present subjunctive, you use not in front of the verb. So like this, I recommend that you not wait until the last minute to do your work.
Please, Ben, stop. Ben, please.
Now, who's... Okay. Well, anyway. Let's see. I recommend that you not wait until the last minute to do your homework. Okay, so here we have a subjunctive wait, but we put a verb adverb not in front of it. So that's how you negate a subjunctive. You don't say don't. I recommend that you don't wait. No. For the subjunctive, it has to be not. You simply use not compared to the indicative where you use do and not or does and not. So we would never actually say, some people probably would say this, but for the subjunctive, this is the standard form to use. Oops. So this right here, we don't use. We don't use that. We don't do that here. I recommend that you don't wait until the last minute to do your work. Some people would say that, but really, it should be not. I recommend that you not wait until the last minute to do your homework or work or whatever. So don't use don't like that because this is a directive and not a statement. But there are times where you could actually use either don't or not. But again, the meaning would be different. So like, I suggest he not have a girlfriend. Versus I suggest he doesn't have a girlfriend. Those mean two very different things. So the first is subjunctive, right? You just have the bare form and then not. I suggest he not have a girlfriend. Versus the second one, which is not a directive, but a fact, or something. Sorry, I don't know why, like, my internet connection is a little crappy. So, sorry. Okay, let me just type that example again. So stupid. Okay. I suggest he not. Okay, so again, the first one is a directive. So it's like a recommendation or a suggestion or an order or a desire.
Bro, you choose the
I what?
you choose the already have the best example.
I'm glad you find it funny. Okay, and it happened again. It just keeps, I don't know why it's doing that. Well, you basically get the idea. Like the first one is just, I don't want him to have a girlfriend. The second one is, he doesn't actually have a girlfriend. I think he doesn't have a girlfriend. That's the main difference.
Yeah, but I have a question about the past subjunctive.
Oh yeah, we're going to get to that. But what's your question? Let me just move this here. What was your question about?
What about the past subjunctive?
Oh, we're going to get into that like right now. I think I've explained everything for the present subjunctive. The past subjunctive works a little bit, it's, oh, wait, no, before we do that, one more thing I forgot to mention. So we talked about the present subjunctive, but what if you have a past tense situation like, he urged that I not go out alone at night. Because here, urge is the past tense, right? But here, we don't change the tense of the subjunctive verb. It just stays in the present, whether you use not or not. Or like, so you could say, he urged that I not go out alone at night. Not, he urged that I didn't go. No, we don't change the tense here for this verb. We keep the tense the same. It's just the present subjunctive, or as some would say, even tenseless. But we don't change the tense of this verb. We could change the tense of this verb right here, but not the tense of this verb. That has to stay in the present. It's not like in Spanish where you actually have to change the tense of this verb too. No, we have to keep this in the present. But that's just something to point out.
Okay.
Okay, but for the past subjunctive, now that's a different topic. So for the past subjunctive lets us deal with hypotheticals. So like, we can imagine things to happen. So if I were rich, right? I'm not rich, but I'm imagining that I am rich. So if I were rich, so that were is very important. So this is what we call the past subjunctive, or to be more specific, the past simple subjunctive. I like to think that there's the invisible should in there to remind me that which is which. Well, yeah, that's basically what I think about it too. Using should like that for the subjunctive isn't actually a bad thing. Like, you can use it to help remind you of whether or not the sentence has a subjunctive meaning, but most Americans don't really do that. But anyway, that is a good point. But anyway, if I were rich is the past simple subjunctive. And if I had been born, let's say I'm a man, and if I had been born a woman, that's also a subjunctive, right? I know, it's a funny example. But this is a past perfect subjunctive. And you can actually change this.
Okay, so if I
Let me actually not do that yet.
Okay, so if you were a beaver, you would eat wood. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
So let me just finish the sentence. If I were rich,
Yeah.
I would buy a big house. If I had been born a woman, I still wouldn't wear makeup. How about that?
Okay, if I had been a woman, I still wouldn't wear makeup.
Yeah.
Okay, so in the this is a close. So in the present we use in the main clause we use a present, a conditional present. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. They're conditional simple, really, because it's the would, but without the have. So yeah, this is, for those of you who saw my conditionals lesson, this isn't really going to be new for you, but I'm just going to explain the past subjunctive in a bit more depth. So we have two, okay, let me break this down. I don't want to make this any more complicated than it has to be. So we have two subjunctives here. We have the past simple subjunctive. So like just the were, like, or anything like that. And then the past perfect subjunctive. So the had been, had done, whatever. Okay, so these are the two different subjunctives you can use. And they can be used with the continuous, so with ing, or without ing. So let me just do that. Actually, let me take that out. No. With or without ing. The ing verb doesn't actually change the time of the thing. With or without ing verb. And past perfect subjunctive, with or without ing verb.
So that's why we use in the in the second, in the second conditional, we use where, if I were rich, I buy a big house. So this is it's about imagination.
Yeah, that's pretty much what it is. In this case, we use the past subjunctive to talk about imaginary things that won't happen, but things that we would like to happen, like things that we can imagine. So the past, as someone said in the chat, the past subjunctive is, it's part of the if clause here. And remember, for those of you who have been reading up on your English grammar, a clause has a subject and a verb. And this is our dependent clause because it has a conjunction in front and it can't stand alone on itself, by itself. It can't be by itself. And the past subjunctive is used after if in this case, any of the past subjunctive forms. So the past simple subjunctive or the past perfect subjunctive. So here we have two past subjunctives. So what's the difference between the two? Well, the past simple subjunctive points to the present, and the past perfect subjunctive points to the past. So that's something that's very important because a lot of people, natives and non-natives, mix this up. So let me make it clear. This points to the present. So let's point this out. Let me just type it down here, actually, that'll work. The past simple subjunctive points to the present, or even the future, really. The past points to the past only. That's something to keep in mind. It's a very important distinction. The past simple subjunctive points to the present or the future, whereas the past perfect subjunctive points to the past only. So here in the first example, it's pointing here, this right here is pointing to the present. If I were rich, because I'm not rich right now in the present. Compared to this example here, if I had been born a woman, because I wasn't born a woman in the past, but if I had been born a woman. So you can't say if I were born a woman. No, because we're talking about a past situation here, and were is for the present. Because even though these are both past tenses right here, one points to the present or the future, and the other points to the past. Because remember, and this is something that's important, tense doesn't always correspond to time. So tense doesn't always equal time. And that's the case here. We have two past tenses, but one is pointing to the present and one is pointing to the past. So just because it's the past tense doesn't mean it's always going to point to the past. But anyway, that's an important distinction here. So, and another thing I should point out, let me clear everything here. So to conjugate for the past subjunctive, you need to do this. So let's do the past simple subjunctive for were. Let's do this. So it'd be were, oh, let me just do this. I were, you were, he were, he, she, it were, we were, you were, they were, you all were. And Okay, so notice how were is used for I and for he, she, and it. Because that's the only, this is the only, let me type this. Were is the only distinct past subjunctive that we have in the English language. And by that, I mean that all the other past subjunctives look just like the past indicative form. So danced is danced, and ran is ran, and so on and so forth. It's not, were isn't the only past subjunctive, it's the only distinct, the only different past subjunctive. The others are just the same as the indicative. So here it's not I was and he, she, it was. It's I were and he, she, it were. So everyone gets the same conjugation just like in the present tense for the subjunctive. I were, you were, he, she, it were, so on and so forth. And for the continuous aspect, it's really just it's really just the ing verb but with were in front. So I were being, you were being, he, she, it were being, we were being, you all were being, and they were being. So this is the simple, this right here is the simple aspect without the ing, and this is the continuous aspect with the ing, but you put were in front. And again, everyone gets were. So I were, you were, I were being, you were being, he, she, it were being, so on and so forth.
For what?
Huh?
For what you were being.
Oh, no, this is just an example. Like, I'm just telling you how to conjugate for the past
Why do you
subjunctive.
put being? Why did you put being?
Oh, because the verb is to be. We're conjugating the verb to be in the past subjunctive.
Oh.
Yeah, so the verb here is to be. Here, let me this out. Past subjunctives of the let me use a different color. Past subjunctive. Move this out of the way. And move this out of the way. Okay. So these are all past subjunctives of the verb to be. Move this out of the way. Okay, so we're just conjugating to be for the past tense of the subjunctive. And for the past perfect subjunctive, we have do this. Okay, I had been, you had been, he, she, it had been, we had been, you all had been, and they had been. So that's how you do the past perfect subjunctive. And with the continuous is just, and again, this is for the verb to be. I had been being, you had been being, he, she, it had been being, we had been being, you all had been being, and they had been being. And really, okay, so that's how you would do it. So this right here, this whole thing is the past subjunctive, the past simple subjunctive, this whole thing right here. The first part has no ing verb, the second part does. And for this one right here, this is the past perfect subjunctive, where you have no ing forms at the top and ing forms at the bottom. So really, these two are similar. It's just that the ing form just makes them different. That's the only difference. And it's the same for the other example right here. These two are the same except for the ing form. And that's how you would conjugate for to be for the past subjunctive. So let me go ahead and type the names here. First, let me move this out of the way. And let me draw
Can
this
you
out.
use you were being?
Yeah, you could say that, and I'll give you an example in a moment. Let me see if I can. Okay, so let me just put the names here for reference. So this is the past, no, not that color. Okay, so this is the past simple subjunctive. Past continuous subjunctive. Past perfect subjunctive. And the past perfect continuous subjunctive. Okay. And let me highlight where, let me highlight this and highlight this to show where the two, where the past continuous subjunctive differs from the past continuous indicative with the were here instead of was. Okay, so that's how you would conjugate for any past subjunctive for all the forms, except for were. Were is a special case. But if you had something like, say, ran, it would be like I ran, you ran, he, she, it ran, we ran, you all ran, and they ran. So you can see here that out of the way. You can see here that every verb is the same here compared to were over here, which was like just different for two persons. So were is the only special case. But in for all other verbs here, like ran, every verb is just the same conjugation, and it's going to be the same as the indicative. So I ran is both indicative and subjunctive. So it's not going to change. Only were changes here. Only were changes. But everything else stays the same. So if I ran really fast, would be subjunctive or indicative. But when you use indicatives after if, that's when things start getting tricky. But so I'm not going to mention that now. But anyway, just wanted to let you guys know that. So but anyway, other than that, it'd still be the same. I were running, you were running, he, she, it were running, so forth. I had run, you had run, I had been running, you had been running. It's the same thing otherwise. So for the past perfect, they're all the same. But for the past simple and past continuous, things change a bit.
Wow, it's a tricky one. It's a tricky one.
Yeah, but once you get the hang of it, it's not really bad. Okay. You could actually here. I'll mention this for now, but I'm not going to cover it. You could technically the present subjunctive also has these forms. So you could say that there's a present simple subjunctive, a present continuous subjunctive, a present perfect subjunctive, oops, and a present perfect continuous subjunctive. But here's the thing, right? Regarding the subjunctive here, this isn't used anymore, this isn't used anymore, and this isn't used anymore. So only the first one is used nowadays. But even that isn't used all the time because some dialects of English don't use the subjunctive at all, or they use a different form. So, but in the past, you could actually say a sentence like this. Let's say we have a present perfect subjunctive. So you could say something like, I insist that the reports have been done by Monday. Back then, you could actually have a sentence like this where you have just have been instead of has been. And you have the present perfect subjunctive. But again, no one talks like this anymore. People would just use the present simple subjunctive instead. So they would say, I insist that the report be done by Monday. But back then, people actually did speak like this. Let me see if I can find an example, actually. Let me stop sharing for a moment. Just to show you guys like that, people actually did speak like that back then. If I can, how could, well, here. Okay, anyway, let's see. See, I believe it's, trying to find it. I had an example saved somewhere. No, that's not it. I had it saved somewhere. I'm trying to find it. Oh, here it is. I found it. Okay. Okay, so let's see. Okay, all right, here it is. Here it is. So here's an example for the present perfect subjunctive. The requirements are that the member be at least 25 years old, that he have been, not be, have been a citizen for 7 years, and that he inhabit the state in which he was elected. So this was for the New York Times, I believe. Yeah, some paper, the New York Times. 1967. So back then, people actually did use that form. But again, no one says that nowadays. You're not going to hear it in speech, and you won't hear it. You'll rarely see it in writing. You may see some remnants in writing, but again, they're remnants. So this form isn't really used anymore. So we don't use this form anymore. With the have been here, no, we don't use that form anymore. We just say, I insist that the report be done by Monday. But that's just so you guys can know, that's just for your reference. So you know that for both the past and the present, you have a simple continuous, a perfect, and a perfect continuous. But we're going to talk about the past subjunctive now, so these don't really matter that much. Just for your reference, I mentioned it. But anyway, let's look at some examples with the past. I could just clear all this out. I don't know why I'm doing that. Okay, let's look at some examples with the past simple and past perfect subjunctive. So let's say, so for were being, someone asked about were being. If you were being locked up in prison, what would you do? Oops, what would you do? This is technically a second conditional formed as a question, but here we have were being. Oops. If you were being locked up in prison, what would you do? So here we have a past continuous subjunctive. Okay, so we have a past continuous subjunctive here with the ing verb, and it's not past perfect, it's past simple. So we just have the were. If you were being locked up in prison, what would you do? So we have being here to show that this is an ongoing action. Of course, you can just say were. It doesn't really matter either way, but I just want to show you an example where you could use were being. So if you were being locked up in prison, what would you do? And of course, if we wanted to change the subject of the sentence, we don't change the verb were to was. So we could say, if he were being locked up in prison, what would he do? Or if she were being locked up in prison, what would she do? So that's an example, because this is an imaginary situation where she's not actually being locked up in prison, but if she were being locked up in prison, well, what would she do? So that's an example where were being could actually work. And for all other examples, you could say, if you, no, I don't like this font color. If you were writing a letter to the president, what would you say? So again, we have another subjunctive here. If you were writing is another past continuous subjunctive here. And here, and see, this is different from the first example. Using wrote instead of were writing here really wouldn't work, because you want to express that this is an ongoing action, like you're not finished with the action. So, because if you said something like, if you wrote, well, actually, I'm trying to think. No, I still think were writing would be better. But anyway, wrote, actually, no, wrote could work. You could say wrote instead of were writing. I don't know what I'm saying. You could say wrote. But if you wanted to say like that you were in the middle of writing a letter, then you would use were writing, because you want to talk about an action that you were in the middle of. So that's really the only difference. But you could use were writing or wrote. But here, this is another example of the past continuous subjunctive, where we imagine a scenario where, you know, like we're writing a letter to the president, even though we're not actually writing a letter to the president. But if we were writing a letter to a president, then, you know, that would fall into, really, in this case, second conditional category and territory, second conditional. Now for the past perfect, actually, let me just show you an example with just the past simple subjunctive. So the past simple subjunctive would be, if you won $1 million, or how about this? Let's just use I. I don't want everything to be a question. If I won $1 million, I would buy 10 cars. How, just 10? Why not 10? If I won $1 million, I would buy 10 cars. So here we have past simple subjunctive, won. If I won $1 million, I would buy 10 cars. This is not the indicative, this is the subjunctive, because this is a hypothetical. We're imagining winning $1 million. Let me move this up. So, okay. And I'll just leave these up here so you guys can just look over them. Let's see. And then let's do one with the past perfect subjunctive. So if I had been more careful, I wouldn't have crashed my car. So here we have, here we have a past situation, right? A past hypothetical situation. You weren't careful. In the past, you were not careful. But if you had been more careful, then you wouldn't have crashed your car. So this is a past event, right? And this here, remember, one and were being, these are present events. This here is a past event. So if I had been more careful, I wouldn't have crashed my car. And this is also a past event too. Remember that in conditionals, both the if clause and the clause after don't have to be in the same time frame. So you could have, if I had worked harder in school, I would have a better job now. It doesn't always have to be would have or wouldn't have. So remember, you could, here, let me actually, well, let me get to that later. I'm getting ahead of myself. So this here is the past perfect subjunctive, also known as the pluperfect subjunctive. So we have a past situation here because, again, in the past you were not careful, but if you had been more careful, well, you would have had a past result of not crashing your car. So with one last example, let's have, if you hadn't been partying, you would have finished your assignment by now. Let's say that. If
You can do an inversion.
Inversion, yeah, I'm about to type an example with that. So if you hadn't been partying, you would have finished your assignment by now. Okay. So again, we have two past events. Hadn't been partying, would have finished. So you were partying in the past, but if you hadn't been partying, so again, since it's a past event, we need the past perfect. So you can't say if you weren't partying, no, that means something else because you're implying now that you're partying right now. But it's a past event, so we need the past perfect. So if you hadn't been partying, you would have finished your assignment by now. So you didn't finish your assignment then, but you would have finished it if you hadn't been partying. And as someone else just said, we can actually invert the sentence. So you could say, had you not been partying, and we could just take the if out and then switch you and had. So we have, let me erase this. So now we have, had you not been partying. So see how we inverted it? Because again, and I said this in my last lesson, only the pluperfect subjunctive can be inverted. You can't invert the pluperfect indicative. So the past perfect indicative or the pluperfect indicative, whichever label you want to use, that can't be inverted. But the past perfect subjunctive can be switched like this. So you could say, had you not been partying, you would have finished your assignment by now. So that's just inversion that you could do. But if you don't want to do it that way, you can just leave the if there and then have normal sentence order. But inverting the sentence does make the inverting the you and the had like that does make the sentence sound a bit more formal to some anyway. But there's nothing wrong with doing it. You can do it, and in formal writing, you'll see that structure quite a bit. But but yeah, you could just leave it like if you hadn't been partying. But inverting the past perfect subjunctive makes the subjunctive more obvious because again, the past perfect subjunctive looks just like the past perfect indicative. So hadn't been partying is the same thing as hadn't been partying. Both the same thing for the indicative and the subjunctive. But it's up to you. You can do whatever you want, really. It's just a matter of style, really. But anyway, So just to type this up here, we have the, oops. These names are getting longer and longer. Okay. Okay. So now we have this. Okay. So move this up, move this up, move this up. Oops. Okay. And this, 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 this. Oops. Hold on. Oh, okay. And okay. And yeah. Okay. So those are all four possible forms for the past subjunctive. So you have the past simple subjunctive, the past continuous subjunctive, the past perfect subjunctive, and the past perfect continuous subjunctive. But if you find this a bit overwhelming, you could just ignore the continuous aspects like this, and then just focus on the basics, like just the simple part, the simples. So no continuous, and you could just think of it like this. And because the continuous really just makes the action ongoing, it doesn't actually change the time frame. So if you focus on just these two for now, and then worry about the other two later, you could do it like that. That's how I recommend doing it, because if you focus on the continuous along with everything else, that will just mess you up. So I would just focus on like 1/10 at a time, or mood or whatever combination, and then you could just add more and more as you feel more comfortable. But other than the continuous aspect, these two right here are pretty much the same. That's the only difference, and it's the same goes for these. But to summarize, the past simple subjunctive points to the present. The past perfect subjunctive points to the past. So just remember that. So for the first two examples, we have a present situation. She's not being locked up in prison, but if she were being locked up, well, that's the imaginary scenario. And the same goes for if I won $1 million. I'm not winning. I don't have $1 million, but if I won $1 million, well, I would buy 10 cars. And then if I had been more careful, because I wasn't careful in the past, I wouldn't have crashed my car. And then, of course, it's the same thing here. If you hadn't been partying because you were partying in the past, you would have finished your assignment by now. So that's an overview of the possible forms. So I can't, oh, right, actually, let me undo that. I forgot to mention, it's not really, if you have the past continuous subjunctive, you can actually invert that too. So you could say something like, were she being locked up in prison? So you could say something like that too. So you could say, were she being locked up. You could take out the if and switch she and were. And then you'd have, were she being locked up in prison, what would she do? With all past continuous subjunctive forms, you can invert. It's just like this form right here with the past perfect continuous. You can invert this, and you can invert this. But you can't really invert this. This you can't invert unless it's the verb were. That's the only verb in the past simple subjunctive that can be inverted. So you could say, if he were taller, this can be, were he taller. So for were, you can invert that too. You just switch were and whatever the subject is and then take out the if. You could do that too, but you can't do that with all the other past subjunctive verbs. So you can't say, won I $1 million. No, it has to be if I won $1 million. But you could invert were with if and he, and that would work. So that's, were is the only past simple subjunctive that can be inverted. So let me just, to emphasize that. Because again, were is a special case. It's like the only marked past subjunctive that we have left in the English language. We had more distinct forms back then in history, but over time they all just faded away, and now most of our forms look just like the indicative. So were is the only past simple subjunctive that can be inverted. So remember that. So you can't invert every other past simple subjunctive. Only were can be inverted. But I think that's all I can say about the past subjunctive. So, and here, so. And let me mention the conditional too, actually. So the conditional uses would, right? So past simple subjunctive points to the present or the future. Conditional simple, so that by simple I mean without the have. Points to the present or the future too. So this is just a recap of what we've learned. So an example here would be, or let's say if I were poor. And then I'll finish the sentence over here. If I were poor, I would be very depressed. So were is the past simple subjunctive, would be is the conditional simple. And then you have actually here, I forgot. Let's say past simple and continuous. Let me do that. Okay. And then we have past perfect continuous. Ah, crap. Okay. And then we have conditional perfect. I guess I should include the continuous forms for those two. I completely forgot about those because, like, continuous is honestly just something I don't pay much attention to for conditionals because they don't really change. Again, they don't change the time of the action, just the ongoingness of the action. But let's just do it like that. Okay. And of course you have this. Oops. So you got past only. Past only. Okay. So they're both past only. So an example would be, if I had gone, let's say there was a chance for you to get married in the past, right? If I had gotten married, I would actually, no, let's not do that example. If I had, let's say, if I had, if I hadn't failed my, if I had failed my driving exam, let's say, okay, take this out, I wouldn't have gotten my license. Let's say that. Okay, so had failed is the past perfect, no continuous here. I wouldn't have gotten, that's just conditional perfect, because it's perfect because we have the have, and it's conditional because of the would. So would have gotten is conditional perfect, but with a not. And no continuous because we don't have ing verbs here. So that's the formula here. So these two can point to the present or the future. These two point to the past only. And of course, you can actually mix the two. So you could have, here, let me just, you could have these, ooh, that looks ugly. You could have this one with this one, and this one with this one. And we'll call this one number 1, and we'll call this one number 2. Oh, wait, no, that's not right. I'm sorry. I mixed these up. This should be pointing to this one. This should be pointing to that one. Let me redraw that. That looks, you can't have like two past perfects like that, or past simples, or whatever. So it should be these two. And these two. So we'll call this one number 1, and we'll call this one number 2. So we have a second conditional here. So I'll call this one the second conditional. And this one is the third conditional. And then for mixed conditionals, let's say we have a sentence like, okay, let's say we have a sentence like, if I had done better in school, I would have a better job now. Or actually, no, that's the second one. Let's save that one. Let's say, if I were more organized, I wouldn't have lost. Actually, no, I have a better idea. If I weren't afraid of spiders, I would have killed the spider in my room this morning. Okay, so here we have weren't afraid. So this is a present situation. If I weren't afraid of spiders, because I am afraid of spiders, but if I weren't afraid of spiders, I would have killed the spider in my room this morning. So I didn't kill a spider this morning because I was afraid of spiders, but I would have killed it if I weren't afraid of spiders. You could technically say if I hadn't been afraid of spiders, but that just implies that you were afraid back then and that you're not afraid now. But that's not really what I'm trying to say here. I'm saying that I'm still afraid of spiders. Like, that's a present situation. But you could change it to a past situation if you're no longer afraid of spiders. So that's the difference here that you need to keep in mind. The weren't here points to the present because you are afraid of spiders. If you used hadn't been, that would mean that you were afraid of spiders in the past, but now you're not. So keep that in mind. And the second one would be, if I had done better in school, I would have a better job now. Let's say that. So here it's the other way around. We have a past situation here, a past condition with the present result. If I had done better in school, because in the past I didn't do well in school, but if I had done better in school, I would have a better job now, because now I don't have a good job, but I would have a better job now if I had done better in school. So this one corresponds to this conditional here corresponds to number 1, right? Yeah, and this conditional here corresponds to, and this conditional here corresponds to number 2. But this is just a brief review on conditionals. So that's how they work, really. So you have second conditional, third conditional, and these two down here would be mixed conditionals. And it really doesn't matter which one how you label them. I call the first one mixed conditional 1 and the second one mixed conditional 2, but some sources may list them differently. It doesn't matter, they're both mixed. As long as you know the structure, it doesn't matter what number you assign them. So I'll just call them mixed conditionals 1 and 2. But anyway, that's how the past subjunctive is used in conditionals. So there's one more thing I want to cover about the past subjunctive, but so far, does anyone have any questions? Because I know I talked a lot. Okay. No? Okay. Yeah, when you get this stuff really isn't that hard to understand. But if for anyone who does have questions, don't hesitate to ask. One last thing. So we talked about hypotheticals with, if and whatever. But what about if you have I wish? So because not every hypothetical is going to have, if you hadn't blah, blah, blah. No, not all hypotheticals are like that. Sometimes we'll just have I wish, right? So after I wish, we could put either the past simple subjunctive or the past perfect subjunctive. But remember, one points to the past, the other points to the present or future. So keep that in mind. So you can technically use either after I wish, but they both point to very different time frames. So keep that in mind. So remember, this one points to the present or the future, and this one points to the past only. But again, natives will often mix up the two. They just do. And because, again, English doesn't define the subjunctive mood very well compared to Spanish, because in English, a lot of the times the subjunctive will look like the indicative. So people get confused because they see sentences like, if he was, let me just, and I'm going to mention this in a later, but let's say if he was there last night instead of, and notice how it's was and not were, because we're talking about a real situation here. We're considering this to be a real situation. So people get confused and they're like, wait, is it was or were? I don't get it. So yeah, that's English for you. So that's part of the reason why people mix these two up. But for I wish, we could say, I wish I were taller.
Oh, so you're small.
Huh?
Are you short?
No, I'm actually pretty tall. This is just an example, of course. I wish I had. Okay, so I wish I were taller. So this means that I'm not tall right now, but I wish I were taller. And again, we use the past subjunctive were because we're not tall right now, but we wish we were taller. So let's see. So that's a present situation because again, you're not tall, but you want to be taller. So you would say, I wish I were taller. But if you have a past situation, I wish I had told my mother that oh no, that's too depressing. Let's go to a different example. I wish shown up on time to work. Yeah, we'll work with that. So here we have a past situation. I wish I had shown up on time to work. We use had shown because you didn't show up on time to work and it's a past situation. But if you had shown up on time to work, then things would be different. So that's why we use the had shown because again, the past perfect subjunctive points to the past only. So after I wish, if you want to show a past regret, like a past situation, you'd say had and then whatever. So had shown. But if it's a present situation, a present regret, I wish I were taller because again, you're not tall right now, then you would use were. So that's really the difference between these two after wish. And of course, these have an implied that. So these have an implied that. You don't have to put the that in there, but you can if you want to. But it's again, it's not really necessary. So that's another way to use the past simple and past perfect subjunctive. Okay. After
What
I
about
wish. Huh?
what about I hope I were taller? Is it possible?
No, you wouldn't use the past subjunctive like that. It's not
Uh-huh.
possible to do it that way.
Okay.
Now for that, I hope, people would say, well, let's not, I hope is less for hypotheticals and more for like just desires like, I hope he comes home safely. We normally, you could technically use the subjunctive after I hope, but people don't like doing that because it sounds kind of weird to most people. Nowadays, it would just say, I hope he comes home safely, or I hope he will come home safely. So, but wouldn't say, I hope he, like, I hope he were to come home safely or something like that. No,
Mm-hmm.
we wouldn't say, we wouldn't use the past subjunctive after hope.
Got it.
Okay, did I can't, I think there was something else I was going to mention, but no, I'm not sure. I think that's it really for the past subjunctive and the present subjunctive. So, was there another quiz I wanted us to move that out of the way? Hmm. Okay. Yeah, we can do this one. They tell you what to do here. You just need to fill in the right verb form. They tell you which verb form to use. You just have to conjugate it correctly. So complete each of the following sentences with the past perfect subjunctive of the verb shown in brackets. For example, they wished they blank not blank to come. So they wished they had not come. So for this one, it would be, I wish I blank ready on time. So they gave us the answer. I wish I had been ready on time. And same thing with this one. Will she wish she blank her bicycle? Will she wish she had ridden her bicycle? So that's the form they want you to use. So what would the first one be? We can start with you, BCat.
Oh, wait.
Are you ready?
Yeah. I wish I had not um uh we had
Do you remember the form for that goes after had? You have the right thing here. It would be lost.
lost.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's what it is. Yeah. But
Mm,
you have the right idea. So yeah, I wish I had not lost the answers. Okay. Vlad, what's the next one?
They wish they had for oh wait it's second bro.
So they wish they blank not blank the
They
appointment.
wish they had not forgotten.
Yes, perfect. Let me just put this here. Oops. I forgot I could annotate over this page, so we're good. I wish they had not forgotten. Or whatever. Let me boost that. Okay. Okay. What would the? Okay, you say he wish he had shown. It really should be shown. You're close. Will then you're close. It would be had shown, not had showed. But yeah, other than that, good work. Okay, so let me take this out. Okay, so now it's back to you, BCat. BCat? Seems she's not answering. Well, I guess we'll just go to you, Vlad,
oh
until she. Oh, you're here. Okay, good.
yeah. I'm sorry.
It's okay.
I was muted. Will they wish we had
Had,
forgiven?
yeah, had
Oh no.
given.
Given. Yeah, given.
Yeah, given. Yeah, you got it. Perfect. Okay. So what would number 5 be, Vlad?
Wish
Wish.
it it had been snow what the fuck
It's
snow
really, huh?
snow
More to it. There's more to it.
Snow?
It's just snowed.
Oh, snow.
Yeah. Oh, that one, yeah, it's just the same. Okay, we wish it had snowed yesterday. Okay, so for you, oh, you already answered it. Okay. She wished she had not opened the window. Yeah, perfect. I don't know how to make this text smaller, but that's okay. Okay. Oh, whoops. I typed the wrong verb. Opened. Okay. What's number 7, B-Cat?
I wished I had heard the news.
Perfect. Okay. I wish I had heard the news. Okay. So what's number 8, Vlad?
You wish you had known.
Oh,
Yeah, had known. Perfect. Okay. Okay. So that's the first one. Let me just erase all of that. So now we're going to, instead of just past situations, we have present situations. So we're just going to use a simple past subjunctive. So like were, agreed, stuff like that. So I'm just going to skip the examples. So what would the first one be? I think it's your turn, Wilden. I wish it were perfect. Okay. What's the second one, B-Cat?
will he wish he was ready or were?
They want the what was is correct nowadays, but they want the were form. So that would be the subjunctive. So it would be were.
Yep.
I can't believe I forgot to mention that. But I'll mention after this. So what would number 3 be, Vlad?
She wish she were known.
Oh no, it's just you just have one verb here.
Ah, she wished she knew.
Perfect. Okay. Number 4. Oh, you already answered it. Yeah, wanted would be the right answer. Okay, B-Cat, what's number 5?
You wish you felt better.
Perfect. Okay. They will wish it. What would that be, Vlad?
It were.
Were.
Yeah. Okay. So Wilden, what would be number 7? Yeah, were. Okay. B-Cat, what's number 8?
Found.
Found, yes. Yeah, you notice that it's the past simple. It's just like in the other the indicative mood, except for were. That's the only difference. So that's really all you have to do. And I think I'm not gonna do the would. That's not really the focus of the lesson. So oh, we have, oh well, that's okay. Share that. Okay, so one last thing I should have mentioned. So was versus were. Okay, so when it comes to the past simple subjunctive, okay, well, here, let me talk about the past simple indicative first. So, you know, the mood where you normally conjugate I was, you were, he, she, it was. So the past simple indicative is just was. So this is just was. But the past simple subjunctive is was or were. So it's both. But this is technically, if we eliminate was here, were is technically the traditional form. I won't say it's wrong to use was because you can use was like that nowadays. But again, were is the traditional form. And Americans prefer this form. So Americans would prefer was. Oh, sorry, were. I don't feel like capitalizing it, but I should. And British English prefers, oh, let me erase that. Oop. British English prefers was, I mean. So British English, and that's not a good looking arrow. Okay. This here, here, and whoop. Okay, so British English prefers the was. So they'll say things like, if I was to, instead of if I were to. So British English would correspond to this form. American English would correspond to this form. We just prefer the were, and British English prefers the was. Although there are some British English speakers who would say were, but this is, and there are some American speakers who would say was. It's not like 100%, but Americans do tend to prefer one form, the were form. Brits tend to prefer the was form. Unless it's you, then you would just say you were, not you was. You still have to conjugate normally, but American English just prefers to keep the same conjugation. British English prefers to just conjugate by person. But nowadays you can use either was or were. What was I going to say? Oh yeah, and of course, one more thing I forgot to mention. If you're going to use were to anything, so let's say if I were to succeed, you can invert that too. So you can say, were I to succeed. I forgot to mention that. This is also something else you can invert. So you can invert were like in front of an infinitive, were by itself, or were in front of a ing verb. So you can take this here and put it right here. And this can stay, this just stays the same. Oops. That just stays the same. Okay. So, but that's another form of inversion that you could do. And I think that's it for the present subjunctive and the past subjunctive. So we've covered the present subjunctive in depth, and we've covered the past subjunctive in depth. We don't really have a future subjunctive because, not like Spanish or Portuguese, we don't have that. It just simply doesn't exist. But the present subjunctive can sometimes be used to express the same idea as the future subjunctive or even the past subjunctive. Because as I said, the past simple subjunctive can point to the future. And the present subjunctive can use should to point to the future. So these two can kind of convey the same idea, but we don't really have a future subjunctive. We just have this one here and this one here. But not, use the color, but not this one. We don't have this one. This one doesn't exist. And I think that's all I can say about the the subjunctive mood. I can't think of anything else. Hold on. Okay, so does anyone have any questions about the subjunctive or anything related, really?
Uh,
Yeah, it's if and of course remember like if you've attended my last lesson, then a lot of this won't be new to you. It's just the subjunctive mood itself in more depth. But does anyone have any questions? No, yeah, probably not. I mean, pretty much explained as much as I could on this, but that's okay. I think I've explained as much as I can on the subjunctive. I can't think of any other. Oh wait, actually, no, because I already kind of mentioned. Well, no, there was one thing. I did provide an example showing that we don't use the subjunctive after like here, like so say like a Bible verse, like though he slay me, I shall trust in him. So we have the present subjunctive used here for slay, though he slay me, and not slays, because you're not saying that someone's actually slaying you. Now, there are other conjunctions in English that used to work like that. So you could say, at one point you could say, before he come, kind of like if he come, but instead of if you have before. But again, no one really talks like that anymore. And there's also unless. Unless works like that too. But again, no one really talks like that anymore. Just something I should point out. Like in case you come across English literature and you're like, why do they use the subjunctive there? Or something like that. So you could say something like, in the past, you could say something like, unless he failed the exam, instead of unless he fails the exam. But again, people don't talk like this anymore. Outside of fixed expressions such as until death do us part, which basically means until death separates us. So in that case, people would still keep that subjunctive do in there, not until death does us part, until death do us part. Then in that case, yeah, people would use it, but that's a fixed expression. And speaking of expressions, I should mention one thing. So the last thing about the present subjunctive is that you can use it in expressions such as God bless you, or God save the queen, or peace be with you, or I said peach, peace be with you, and what else? There are other ones too. Heaven forbid. And yeah, stuff like that. So we have expressions like these. They're called let me just. They're essentially called hortatory expressions, which are basically like they're kind of like a desire and an order combined, if that makes sense. So it's kind of like a wish and an order combined. Like if you're like if you want to wish someone good luck, you could say peace be with you or God bless you or whatever. So in cases like this, you would use a subjunctive. We would not say God blesses you. That would mean something else. Not that you would never hear that, but that means something else entirely. And God saved the queen, not God saves the queen. And peace be with you, not peace is with you. And heaven forbid, not heaven forbids. So these are all hortatory expressions, and we use the subjunctive here because we're expressing some sort of order or command or wish like that. So we don't use the indicative here. We have to use the base form. And regarding heaven forbid, if you wanted to say something after it, like heaven forbid someone, heaven forbid you fail the exam, like something like that. You would actually use the subjunctive after that, although some people use the indicative, but it would be better to use the subjunctive. So you could say, heaven forbid that he come home late. So that's really a subjunctive with a subjunctive. So heaven forbid that he come home late, not that
Oh, I
he
have a
comes home
question.
late. Yeah.
Heaven forbid. What does it mean?
Oh, it basically means I hope that this doesn't. I hope to God that this doesn't happen. Basically, that's what it
Oh,
means. Yeah.
oh, all right.
Yeah.
Mm, got it.
Yeah. But that's that. And okay, so regarding the present subjunctive, I forgot to mention one more thing. It's possible to have more than one clause in the subjunctive. So you could say, I insist that he ask that she be quiet. So you could have something like that. So here, see, we have this is an indicative. I insist, because the subjunctive can't be alone like that. You can't have it alone in the sentence, in the clause like that, unless it's an expression as I just showed you. But anyway, this is I insist. But here you have two subjunctives. He ask and she be quiet. And we connected these two clauses with that. So you could technically have more than one clause be in the subjunctive. So I insist that he ask that she be quiet. So it's just an order upon an order. So you could actually have that in English. It's not common to find examples like this, but they do exist. So just keep that in mind. There are some sentences that will have more than one clause in the subjunctive. And you could theoretically keep going forever and never and ever, but I'm not going to be childish, so I'll just leave it at 2 clauses after the first clause. So I insist that he ask that she be quiet. Normally people don't go past 3 in that manner, but if you wanted to be really crazy, you could say, I insist that he ask that she demand that we request that, let's just not go that far. But you could theoretically keep going. But still, the point is that you could have more than one clause in the subjunctive. So that's something to keep in mind. I think I've talked about all I can about the subjunctive. So remember, the subjunctive, in the present tense, the subjunctive takes the same form as the infinitive. And in the past tense, it's just the third person plural. So be is simply be, were is it's just like were. So like for the present subjunctive is just be. The past subjunctive is were. And this is for the verb be. To be. So remember, you have to take the 2 out, and then that's your present subjunctive. And for were, it's just a third person plural. So you would say they were. So take the same form as they, and then you have were. And of course, for all the other verbs, like let's say for the verb to swim, we have present subjunctive swim, past subjunctive swam. So it's really simple to conjugate here. And someone came and just left. I don't know why, but anyway. And for let's try a regular verb, a verb without any irregular conjugation. So for the verb, let's say walk. Walk is regular. To walk. So it would be the present subjunctive would be walk. The past subjunctive would be walked. So basically it's this. The present subjunctive, same form as the infinitive without the to, but with the past subjunctive, were is a special case. You just use the third person plural. For really all the verbs, but for were, it just happens to be different from the others. And for to swim, again, you use the base form and then the third person plural because, yeah. But like for past subjunctive, it's the same as the past indicative in most cases, except for were. So were is a special case. But anyway, but basically, not to make it so confusing, think about it like this. Present subjunctive used to bear infinitive. Past subjunctive, it's the same as the past indicative in every case except were. So were is just a special case, but every other verb is going to be the same as the indicative. So swim. So like this. Okay, but and of course walk is the same. Walk is just walk for the present subjunctive and walked past tense for the past subjunctive. And that's pretty much all I can say about the subjunctive. I can't think of anything else to talk about. Yeah. So I'm about to end the meeting soon, but does anyone have any questions before I go? I don't know who just did that, but okay. Well, if no one has any questions, I think that's all I'm going to talk about for the subjunctive. I can't think of anything else to talk about for it. Next time, I'm going to try to see if I can do prepositions. Like not to explain the definition, but to just show you guys what they look like. Like I'll just, like for example, I'll say the bottle is on the table. I'll just show a bottle, being on top of a table, like stuff like that. And I think this one's going to be this one's probably going to be like for not just for advanced students this time, but for advanced students and intermediates. But yeah, anyway, I'll think of something. But hopefully you all enjoyed that lesson. So if nobody has any other questions, I'll just go ahead and stop the meeting. And thank you all so much for coming to this lesson. Hopefully you had fun. Okay, so with that, goodbye everyone.
Bye.
Bye. Oh, you're welcome, Wilden. Okay, bye everyone.